Best ever listeners, welcome to the Best Ever CRE show. This is Beyond Multifamily. I'm Amanda Cruz. Ash Patel is out today, and dang, he missed a really good show. I interviewed Logan Fullmer. He's doing some incredibly interesting deals, all distressed acquisitions, and he really dives deep into the details, how he's finding deals, how he fixes title problems with heirs, all sorts of things. And he gets really, really tactical and doesn't hold anything back. It was a really great show. I wish Ash could have been here because he would have really enjoyed it. And make sure, a couple things for you, best ever listeners. Number one, if you haven't already gotten your ticket for the conference in Salt Lake City in February, make sure you get it. I'll be there. Ash will be there. We're really looking forward to chatting with everybody. It is the best commercial real estate conference of the year. And you can use all capital podcast 10 to get your 10% off ticket. Let's see what else we have. I would love to interview you. Come on. Ash and I say that all the time. We want to interview you if you're doing commercial deals. So you can go to bestevercre.com and then go to podcast sign up to apply. And we want to hear about the deals you're doing, your wins, your losses, all the things. All right, let's get going with Logan. Logan Fullmer, welcome to the Best Ever CRE show. How are you doing today?
Pretty good.
Oh, I can't wait to unpack that. I mean, let's start there. Why only pretty good?
You know, sometimes it's a good idea to slow down and be thoughtful. Folks say, how are you? And what do we always say? We say good,
Fine.
right? Sometimes you are, sometimes you aren't. So I don't know. I think it's important to recognize that, you know? I mean, by all measures, I would say I'm happy. I've got family of four, a business, runway in front of me that I could never outrun, all those things. But then I find myself behind in meetings and 40 things going on today. And I'm like, how did this happen today? Anyway, yeah.
Interesting. I want to learn a bit more about your systems and your business. Before we jump too far in, can you give the Best Ever listeners a little bit about your background and what you focus on now?
Yeah. Let me get this down in 3 minutes, maybe. Grew up in Central Texas, small town. Mom was did sales. Dad was a CPA. Despite all that, didn't really have a lot of money because Dad had a little bit of a drinking problem. And, I had to get out there and just figure out, what am I going to do? They're both professionals, had degrees, but, economics in our household wasn't great. Environment wasn't great either. So I had to go out there in life and figure it out. It was easier for me to use drugs and alcohol as coping mechanisms. So that was a big thing in my life till my mid-20s. Getting through that, I had to go to treatment center 3 times, finally figured that out, went to the oil field. And at that point, I'm in a place where I'm in the middle of nowhere, earning 3 times what I ever had. And it's just me and this job site and 100 dudes. And as weird and nasty and ugly as that sounds, it was the best part of my life. Literally, it's probably better than today. But that's where a lot happened. You get to learn who you are, you get to build some esteem, some confidence, some success, things like that. And I realized at that point, okay, there's more here. What should I do? And I started to want to do real estate, although my dad was I hate to say it this way, but as a failing CPA, he had some interesting advice. And one thing I saw is all of his clients that had tons of money were in or around real estate. And I thought, well, maybe I'll go that route. So I went on this journey of about 12 years, investing a little bit, figuring it out, getting laid off from the oil field, having some extreme successes that were just right place, right time. I gambled on red and it happened to hit red,
Literally, you gambled on red or as investment strategy?
Investment strategies, yeah.
Darn, that would have been really cool.
Yeah. You'll find throughout this conversation, I talk about managing my risk down because during those tough times in my life, I inherited about 7 figures and just blew it. Drugs, alcohol, Porsches, partying, stupid stuff. When I went to work in the oil field, I had about $4,000 left. I had enough to basically live for about a month and a half. And I was like, I'm at the end of my rope. And I didn't want to be like that anymore. When I finally got clear-headed, I thought, I have to figure out how to put something in front of me that manages risk, protects me, preserves for going forward. And those were big thoughts for a dude who just got sober and had no money. But my first investment strategy was a very risk-adjusted one, in my opinion, at the time. And that's carried out even through a very aggressive business model today that's continued. So, today I've got an office of about 26 people now. There are 3 distinct divisions in this office. A curative title and distressed property acquisition. That's 70% of what we do in terms of volume. I've got a commercial portfolio that's got mostly industrial and some office. And then I have a land development arm of the business that does, the small lots that you sell, 2, 3, 4, 500 lot subdivisions to the big builders who buy them and title the land, get them MUD approved and then sell it to the builders. So those 3 distinct business lines are what happened here.
Good for you. I mean, you've been through a hell of a lot. You landed on red, you got a lot of money, but you had nothing to show for it after that, and you built yourself up again. That's an amazing story. All right, I have to ask, was working on the oil field like Landman? Have you seen that show?
Yeah, I watched it. One of my fourth cousins, who's a real estate attorney, not practicing, he does deals. Dude, he is Billy Bob Thornton's personality to a T. He's not in the oil field, he's in real estate, but my gosh, it's a fun show. And they do, there's technical differences, obviously, but there's a lot of similarities. There's a lot there, yeah.
All right, so you went through that, which was a fun time, but I imagine a lot of work, and you can almost die every day, to getting into real estate, which we get some dopamine hits here and there, but we're safe. We're not typically going to die. I mean, I own some assets that maybe when we first bought them were questionable, but now we're good.
Yeah.
You said your first investment, and still you're very risk adjusted. What was that first investment that got you in?
So I'll back up again. When I inherited all that money, I was just having fun. I thought it would last forever. When you're 25 years old, you think $1 million is enough to live your not life. But when you buy a car that's $100,000 and you buy a house and you start spending, it doesn't go as far as you think. And when I started earning again, I was earning at a rate of about $75,000 a year. So you got to pay taxes and got to pay some living, although it's low because living in their housing there. You could pocket, I don't know, $50,000 a year and save it. Within a couple of years, I started earning about 150 range. So I was starting to save more and more. But I realized how much money I've blown in a few years and how slow it was to earn it when I wasn't spending my grandparents' entire life savings. I'm like, oh my God, it'll take me a lifetime to rebuild what I burned. So I have this cash, a couple $100,000 that I saved and earned. And I'm thinking, okay, how much does it take me every month to live? How long would this last theoretically? I'm like, oh God, this won't go very far. So I thought maybe I'll invest or something to try to make more of it. And I remember looking at the east side of San Antonio. I had some friends that were in real estate. I was Googling, just kind of thinking things through. And I'd go travel to San Antonio weekends because it was near the oil fields. I remember seeing this land that was like $5,000 on the appraisal district, $5,000 per lot. And these are infill lots, 7th largest city in the United States. They got a paved street. They're across a big highway from downtown. They're adjacent to the MSA down there, or the Central Business District there. And they got utilities to the lot. It's they used to have houses on them. And I'm thinking, if I buy these for $5,000, and they go down in price, what do they go down to $4,000? How much is really at risk? So at this point, I realized I'm buying a $5,000 lot. I might have $1,000 or $2,000 at risk. So it's not like I'm risking $5,000. I'm risking $1,000. So the addict in me was like, one is good, as many I could possibly get is better. So I pushed all the chips across the table and spent basically everything I'd saved to buy all these vacant lots. And I'm spending $5,000-$10,000 a piece basically. And then I get a call that's my biggest concern though, managing on the risk. And the taxes are a couple $100 a year. I can preserve these lots working at Jack in the Box if I lose my oil field job. I'm always worried about what's going to go wrong. How do I protect all that? And then this realtor calls me and says, my client wants to buy your lot, found your name on the appraisal district. Would you take $200,000 for it? And I run back to my accounting or my Excel sheet at the time. And I'm like, I'm in this thing for $20,000. Yeah, I'll take $200,000. It was actually $189,000. Sold it, pocketed the money, almost recapitalized everything I'd invested in all those lots in one shot. And then I got laid off a couple weeks later, or maybe a few months. I can't remember exactly. I remember being at this fork in the road. I got a couple $100,000 in my bank account. I don't know, 18 lots or whatever it was at the time. And I'm laid off. I'm like, am I going to go back to the oil field or am I going to try something new? That was the fork in the road.
What year was that?
2014 or 15, I think. Yeah.
Okay. So that's an interesting time in the market where people are slowly starting to get back in. At least you'd kind of miss the Great Recession for land. Okay. So then you buy that, you sell, is it one lot they sold for, or how many lots did they buy for the 200?
Technically it was 2. I bought one for $5,000, one for $5,000. I spent $10,000 rezoning it. I saw the big developers doing that and thought if I get a better zoning, maybe it's worth more. It allowed someone to build 4 houses on it instead of 2. So I went and zoned it and filed a plat. I had no idea what I was doing. I was just asking people and they'd say, do this. It was like, I was stumbling around.
That is so smart, right? I mean, it takes years for a lot of people to even think of things like that. And here you are in your first investment thinking, oh, how can I rezone this? That's not even in people's heads for a lot of people, their entire real estate career. And here you are doing it on your very first go. That's amazing. And then, so fast forward a few years, you're buying value add stuff all over the place, right? What is it you buy now?
So there's this version of change that happened in that time. I went back and wanted to buy more of those lots. And the hard part is I was knocking on doors, and at this time you started to have sales on market. When I was buying originally, there were no on market sales. It was all off market speculators. Now the cat was out of the bag. People knew. So it was tough. I was knocking on doors and people would say, I'm not selling this for $5,000 for 50 or 100 or 200 or whatever. But at the end of 2017, I was going to foreclosure auctions and did some house flips. I'm just trying to figure, and I was doing that zoning case. I was just doing all this stuff to like figure it out. And I remember thinking, dang, how do I get those cheap lots again? Because that was like my biggest lick ever. I'm thinking, how do I replicate this? And I remember seeing a bunch of properties that had not transacted. They had lots of delinquent taxes and multiple owners. I learned how to use the land records, the deed record, and the docket search. And I realized those haven't sold. I don't think they can sell. And right about that time, I was selling a vacant lot that I bought without title insurance. Never bought without title insurance, but it was cheap. It was $5,000. It was one of the later ones. And I remember I was making money on a couple of them. So I thought, who cares? I'll buy it. The guy said, I'm not taking you to a title company. Just bring me money to my house. I'm like, yeah. Brought a deed to his house, brought the money, brought a notary. Well, when I went to go sell that thing, I owned one night. There were 8 other owners. That was a big problem.
All right. So you learned about title the hard way. Got it.
So yeah, in that time, I'm trying to figure out like, what's my next move? Because my first big move, like paid out, I'm not poor anymore. I got something going on. And so I went to a local attorney's office and started talking to him, asking questions. And they're like, you got to go to this guy. You got to buy this guy. You got to buy this girl. And I can't get title insurance. I'm just buying these. I'm basically calling people saying, look, I thought I bought your property. Apparently I bought a piece of it. I got a title cloud. Can I give you $500 for your share? It was delinquent on taxes. They'd all written it off anyway. So I aggregated the ownership, and there's a judgment against one of them. I negotiated that with the creditor because I didn't want to pay they had like 10 grand and the interest was like 20. So I called the creditor and said, hey, dude, this judgment is like 8 years old. You ain't getting your money. I like to buy judgments. Can I give you $1,000 for it? And they thought, sure. Well, they said, and they came back, so I'll take 2. So I bought the judgment for $2,000 and then thought, oh, I have the right to release this now. So I filed my own release. And during that experience, it allowed me to understand that those other properties that had not transacted, there was a reason. That became like the purpose of my business. So for the last 10 years, I've gone after judgments, liens, lawsuits, bankruptcies, family fights, missing owners, just breaks in the title chain. We bought mineral interests. I've got warehouses, offices, land subdivisions, anything. It's crazy.
Logan, this is so interesting. You started with the hard stuff. Everybody else starts with the easy things and they're like, oh, there's a title issue. I'm not going there. Deal's falling apart. But it's really smart if you have the skills to go in and solve these problems, which I'm still not sure how you knew how to buy a judgment on your second, third deal. That's amazing. Can you walk us through that transaction? Like, how did the conversations go? What all happened before you acquired all of the parcel?
I'll tell you, I did a bad job in school. I would never have been able to make it to be a doctor or a lawyer because there's a lot of technical things that get in your way. But I'll tell you what I feel like I did have a lot of is common sense. It made sense. I remember thinking, this creditor hasn't gotten paid in 8 years and the judgment will expire or the lien is uncollectible within 10 years unless they refile it. And I started to Google and learned and looked around the land records, and creditors don't usually refile. 10 years is a long time to forget about it. And I just remember thinking in my head, like, I'll give you 1,000 or you're going to get nothing. A little bit of something is better than a little bit of nothing, right? And I remember the attorney saying, well, that might work. It might not. And then the escrow officer was like, no, they're not going to do it because they know it's holding up a property sale. And I'm like, well, then I'm just not going to tell them it's holding up a property sale. And they're like, oh. So there's a lot of common sense, in my opinion, there. And I think people overlook that. They get real technical and all this procedural and details. I'm like, dude, just ask them if they'll let it go. You ain't getting any money anyway.
That's really smart. In fact, funny enough, I have a similar situation where I'm kind of in a holding pattern on this land where I bother to go in and get access to it. My company's the only one that has access. But then like the initial title stuff was fine. So we get access. That was a whole hurdle, several months. But then the day before close, the attorney's like, actually, there are title issues after all this time, all this nonsense. And so what would you do?
So
you would track down all the relatives?
Were you an attorney state or a title company state in that deal?
Attorney.
Your attorney ran what's known as a bring to date. Are you familiar with what that is?
No. And so what happened on our case was she was like most residential. So this is a residential attorney, right? Because this is just a piece of land. they kind of are an all stop, and they're like, they put it on the seller to go back, and like they have their own attorney. They're in the middle of figuring it out, but now it's been a few months, and I'm like, all right, this isn't going to get figured out, right? So perfect timing, Logan. What do we do?
So what happened probably is the attorney ran a bring to date right before close and discovered something they missed the first time. Or while you're in contract, judgments can be filed, other things can happen that affect title. So they run a bring to date right before it closes. That's probably what happened, or they forgot. I don't know, one of those two.
I think it was they didn't go back far enough to see. Yeah, that's what I think happened based on it. So there are a bunch of heirs. Things weren't written right when the land was first acquired, as far as the ownership. So there's ambiguity. And so now there are a bunch of heirs who may have some ownership stake. So would you go? What would you do? Go find them all, track them all down?
First things first, you have to know what the real problem is, because what you told me is a roundabout. I would ask the attorney, say, give me the entire title report, every instrument in the title report, lay it all out on a big piece of a table or down your hallway or whatever. Start with that very first deed that he gives you and go highlight the grantor, which is the seller, the grantee, which is the buyer, and the legal description. Now you know Johnny sold it to Susie for $10, whatever. Now I'll go, okay, go to the next deed. Grantee, grantor, which is the seller, that's Susie, your prior grantee. Now you go to your next grantor, which will be the seller the next time. Walk all the way through that title report, and at some point you're going to find a problem. You're going to find Johnny sold it, but some other person has a deed from somebody else. And you're going to wonder, where did that deed come from? There's no one in the title chain with that name. You'll find something like that. Or you might just find a deceased person and then someone's selling you a contract, but there's no probate, there's no heirs involved. So you're wondering, where's this break in the title chain coming from? You got to find out the exact problem. My gut says there's a break in the title chain and there are people who haven't signed your contract that are owners. That's usually what it is.
Sounds right. And then what do you do?
Now you've got to go back to them and say, look, I'm buying this property, but we got a problem. You're not part of the deal, but you own it. You got to get in the deal. That's a very simple version. Now, if I were in your shoes, I would understand this very well. And then I would go back to the seller you're talking to and say, sorry, I can't give you $100,000. You own 1/6. 1/6 of $100,000 is $20,000. But since I'm taking all this risk, I can only give you $3,000, dude. But I'll give it to you tomorrow, and I won't get title insurance. I'll give you $3,000 tomorrow. I'd scoop that interest for about a third or less of what it's worth.
So you would go ahead and buy the property and just with risk capital.
That person's interest in the property.
By that person's interest. But you would thank you for clarifying that. So you would buy that person's interest in the property with potential money that could just be lit on fire and then go try to solve it after that.
So how much risk do you have in a deal if you have no money in it?
Well, none. Well, my time. Your
time. But for discussion's sake, let's just talk about risk-adjusted efforts. The fewer dollars you have in it, the lower the risk you have. Like a lot of times when you're in a big commercial real estate deal, you've de-risked it when you refinance and take all the investors' money out. It's de-risked. It's non-recourse. If it gets foreclosed on, who gives a shit? It's a bummer, but you got your money out. There's nothing to risk anymore. Well, if you can burn $500 or $2,000 because you picked up 10 or 20 in equity, your concept is perfect.
Very interesting. I don't think I've ever heard somebody say to do this before.
Yeah, it's shocking. I've been yapping about it on the internet lately for the last couple of years. And I got an office of 25 people. We do $20-30 million a year in transactions like this. And I still meet people all the time and say, I've never heard of that. And I'm like, how? I've been trying to tell the whole world.
Well, I looked at your website. I think your persona, your person is capturing maybe like a young 20-year-old that you used to be. I don't think I hit your algorithm. Okay. I'm like a mom who's like 39 and I don't want to own a jet. So I think maybe your algorithm hasn't gotten to me yet, but now that we're connected, I bet I'll start seeing your stuff.
Interesting.
Okay. So we buy it. We'll go chase down the people. We'll try to give them money, own 100%. Great. What else? What other problems come up that you find and solve?
Judgments and liens are a big one. The multiple owners that aren't part of the transaction are a big one. Another shocking problem we find is, for simplicity's sake, let's just say there are two owners and you buy one of them and you go to the next one and they say no. And I say, what do you mean no? There's a bunch of money owed in taxes. If it's a house that's dilapidated, it's uninhabitable, there are code compliance liens, the city's been boarding it up and mowing it. Or if it's land, it's rural, you live in a different state, you've abandoned it. What do you mean no? Click. They don't even tell you why no. And you're like, uh-oh, now I got a problem.
And what do you do?
So The unfortunate part is, well, fortunate for some, unfortunate for others. There is always a solve to any real estate problem that's in the judicial system. You file a lawsuit, go in front of a judge, you tell the judge your problem. It falls under about 8 or 10 different rules. So the tax code, the property code, the estates code, and the probate code, those are the 4 sets of like codified laws that affect these type of transactions. There's a solution in there. Sometimes you like it, sometimes you don't. So when you get into big value deals, and we've done deals that are 3 million, 6 million, like significant ones, you really have to understand what's going on. But when you're dealing with smaller value ones, who cares? Shoot first and ask questions later. In this case, there's a lot of ways to do it. The way the law typically works in most states is Amanda and Logan own property together. We're siblings, or maybe we're business partners. Logan cannot commit waste to the property because it damages Amanda's equity. Same for Amanda. You have to pay your share of the taxes. You have to pay your share of the utilities. You have to repair 50% of the roof or 50% of the obligation. If either of us don't uphold our obligations, we're damaging the other. Now you have a civil claim against that person. A civil claim can wind up in a judgment against somebody. Judgments can be perfected, meaning foreclosed on. So there's a process where you go through and you can foreclose on a co-tenant, which is a co-owner, if they don't uphold their obligation. It's really a pain. You don't want to do it because it can take a year or longer. You've got the judicial proceedings, you've got the foreclosure process. Then you have to wait for the judgment to be finalized. It's a hassle, but when you find yourself in that spot, you can get out of it. As long as you're cheap enough, you can afford to carry it and wait.
How long does it take typically to close these longer deals that you do?
I like answering this question because it talks about an evolution of a business. So 2020, I did a pipeline review with our office, which is a lot smaller than it is today. And I remember looking at the typical deal cycle. We were between 9 and 18 months. Like that was what we expected to get deals done. That is a long time. And we're extremely careful with our capital, like retained earnings. Like we do not waste money. Like we're really good about it. We've never taken third party equity to build our business. So we could get through those ups and downs, but that's a terrible way to run a business, even if you're careful. So I remember thinking, all right, guys and gals, just because you could doesn't mean you should. I know we've unlocked this special thing, but don't go crazy. Pick deals that are messed up enough to get a discounted purchase price, but not so messed up that you think we're going to be dealing with it for years. Today, we're 4 to 5 months, our typical turn time, and probably a third of them, we rip through like 60 days because we understand the problem. We've seen it so many times. And if it's too complicated, I got easier money to make than that one over there. Let's do another one.
What's too complicated versus what is in your wheelhouse, easily solvable?
That's kind of a soft skill. At this point, you kind of have to start to understand like what the risks are and what it looks like after you've been through enough transactions. You'll start to get a good sense of, like, give me an example. When I talk to 3 people and they're just disconnected in different states, they don't get along, but none of them are adversarial to me. They're just adversarial to each other. That's a home run. I'll just buy everybody separately and I'll run a title search to see if there are judgments or liens against them. They'll either do a probate or an affidavit of heirship, depending on the state. You're done. You can rip that one out in 30 to 60 days. On the other hand, I talked to somebody, there's 60 owners of a property. It's worth $1.25 million. They hate each other. One's been trying to sell it. There's delinquent taxes. There's one probate that was started but incomplete. You look at that and say, oh, and they want $1 million? I'm like, no way.
You just keep following up?
No. I tell them you lost. Adios. There's so many transactions like this. So many, especially when you draw a line down the United States and go east. Then the states where folks started to colonize and come into first, you've got older land ownership. As you go west, it's newer ownership. You got more of it as you go further east and south. But even in like the more developed cities, I can go to Los Angeles. If you drop me off in the middle of downtown Los Angeles right now with Redfin and my phone and a bicycle, I could find you 3 transactions within 1 hour, guaranteed.
I love it. What would you do?
I would get on the bike, turn on Redfin, look at the values, solds, not listings, and I'd start to look at the values. I would drive around until I saw transitional areas that have new house flips, new remodels, but strong values, because you're going to see crummy houses over there too. Typically, you'll find them in that area. The other one is when you drive to a completely stabilized, turned over neighborhood, but there's 2 or 3 just train wrecks in the middle of them. They always have the problem. It's easy to find. Now,
it's funny you said common sense because that makes sense, right? There's a reason it's never sold.
Yeah, right.
And what do you do next? So I mean, you look them up, you go to the county records or whatnot, and you just reach out and you say, why hasn't this sold?
Yeah, my pitch has gone. I mean, I've tried every pitch in the world. I've, started out with like a lot of times they're delinquent on mortgage or taxes or have code compliance liens or something. I'd start with that. I've started with everything. These days, I mean, I haven't been on the phone in probably 5 years. It's my team, but today my team basically just called and uses the same approach I did. I am a real estate person. I work on transactions that are kind of messes and I usually work them out. It looks like you got one of those. I don't know. Would you want to talk to me about it for a little bit? That's it. Simple,
How did you know? Because you went further than just looking at ownership to know there are problems. So what were you looking at to figure out what the problems were before you even called?
Well, I found the problems first. Like in the early days when I had a couple of those transactions I told you about that were messes, and I kept finding that when there were when there were delinquent taxes, there's a delinquent mortgage, people aren't getting along. Those are the kind of folks that don't solve problems. And you might have your stuff together, but you have a sibling who's a train wreck and your mom's house is inherited. It's over in Nebraska and it's not super duper valuable. And you hate your brother because he's been all these reasons. You might just write it off and say, F it. Where there's problems of one nature, many times there are problems of another nature in that regard. So I found they happen. So now that I know that usually attaches, I mean, probably 1 in 5 times we find one problem and not the other. So it's a nice deal and we take it. But many times they have both. When that happens, I know that now. So we'll just look. We know there's a house that looks like it's fallen over or a rural tract of land that's just absolutely abandoned. It's a little bit behind on taxes. Let's go see what the problems are and see if they're worth solving. So we run our own title report in our office. We'll do the abstract work and say, oh, wow, it's missing a probate. That's clear. Then we research in ancestry.com or look for an obituary on Google. And we realize there's a dead dude on title. I find his obituary and I list his 6 kids. Like, oh, there's your problem.
That's interesting. We've always just waited until we were under contract to have our attorney run title for us. We've never bothered to go run our own title search. How might I do that?
Deed records mostly are indexed online now on a virtual portal.
Do your own manual search. Oh, I do that plenty. Mm-hmm. Okay, got it. So you're just going back through the register of deeds, owner by owner, and doing all that manual searching yourself.
There are third-party companies that offer title reports that are pretty darn good these days. They'll do them in 24 hours and they cost you a couple $100. I usually won't spend a ton of time or money. So like once you start to understand these, I tell like a lot of house flippers and wholesalers, look, y'all are sourcing your own deals some now, you get it. If you want to try a couple of these, just try to find some of these messes, have conversations with people, get a verbal from them. If they say, yeah, man, I'd take $500 for my 25% share. I could care less. Go ahead and send them a contract. You don't need to know all those problems. I can promise you they're going to be there if this is the situation that's happening. But go ahead and just sign a contract with them. It's $500. Who cares? Once you have a contract and your time is preserved, locked in, like the equity or an agreement, now go do the research. We usually won't get that much research done. I was talking about that for like the sake of discussion if you dropped us off in Los Angeles. But yeah, I'd get a contract from somebody before I dig deep.
Which makes sense before you spend all your time before you even make a phone call. And then you get it under contract. What price are you offering? Is there a certain percentage of market value?
It's as little as possible. So during those conversations, I'm like in the investing business. I would listen to people's pitches to like they would talk about it at events on the internet and stuff. And I was disappointed because everybody's, pardon my French, they're a bunch of pieces of shit, basically. They have all this salesmanship and all this trash. I'm like, dude, this is BS. Why don't you just be straightforward? I'm interested in buying this. It's a train wreck. I'm only willing to take the risk that you're not willing to fix. So I can't pay you. Your share is worth 20 grand. I've said that more times than I can count. Your shares are 20 grand, but it's really only worth what someone will pay. And you guys have tried to sell it 5 times. No one would buy it. That means it's actually worth no money. Me giving you $500 is not me buying the property. It's me taking your place. So I'm going to take your seat at the Thanksgiving table with all these siblings who you hate. I know you don't like it at that table. I don't know if I'm going to like it. I hope I can fix the problem. That's why I can only give you $1,000. But I understand if you think that's too little, I respect that. Here's how you can fix it. And I tell them the whole process. And the reason I tell them the whole process is I want to be transparent. I want them to know I'm not hiding anything from you. This is what I'm going to do. It helps them understand that I'm an expert and I know what the heck I'm doing. It also helps them understand how freaking complicated it is. And they're like, F it. I'll take the $1,000.
Scare the crap out of them.
It's true. They haven't been, someone's usually tried to fix these problems and they can't. So when I tell them, look, I'll give you $2,000. Matter of fact, I'll give it to you tomorrow. You don't have to go to a title company, sign all this paperwork, read it with a notary. I'll send it to you tomorrow. Done. I'm going to pay as little as possible. And during the conversation with them, I'm listening for cues. Do they say stuff like, there's a hotel development across the street. It's worth $2 million. Or are they like, God, I could care less. Mammy's house is falling over anyway.
Do you make offers to everybody?
It doesn't make sense. You know, when I hear people saying stuff like, it's worth $2 million, I'll immediately cut to the chase and say, look, I can only give you a pittance. Like literally, I actually don't think it's worth $2 million. I don't want to disagree with you. If I look at property over there, it might be worth $200,000. You only own 10%. That's $20,000. You might have $20,000 in equity. Should we continue talking or no? I don't want to waste time. I've got a lot going on. I got 4 kids, a wife. I'm trying to run a business. If they're here to waste my time, I ain't fooling with that. There are enough people out there. It's just like being in a dating game. Before I met my wife, there's like enough people out there that I'm not going to waste my time with like the wrong thing. I can figure it out. Let's just go to the right thing.
Other than maybe if somebody drops you off with a bicycle and a phone, how do you source deals today?
So we've got some pretty sophisticated scraping tools and stuff, but ultimately they do what we used to have to do manually. The simple answer is you're going to pull up your land records in whatever county that you're working or living in and look for mortgage foreclosure postings, tax foreclosure postings. It's just a 1 or 2 page document, it's a filing. You can go to the appraisal district, your tax office, and a lot of jurisdictions will have like et al. Or estate of in front of deceased people's accounts, things like that. You can go and search judgments or liens and then cross-search that in the appraisal district to see if the debtor owes real estate. One of the ways I did it early on, I was really trying to develop a model. I was trying all these different things. I'll never forget this Friday. I was driving through the quarry, which is a big multi-use development. I was just worn out that week, man. And I thought, I don't want to open up a computer again, but I could talk. And I just started calling wholesalers and realtors because I thought, well, I bet they've had deals that have failed. I was just yapping, just calling them, hey, here's what I do. What do you got? Shockingly enough, almost every one of them said, well, I have this deal that couldn't close and here's why. And I would always ask, are they exhausted yet? Or are they going to still try to fix it? And, oh, they're still trying to fix it. I'm like, all right. But when I would hear, man, they're exhausted, they're ready to walk away. No. Let me give you $2 or $3 grand, walk them to my office. Boom. And when I got a deal that Friday driving down through that, I remember thinking, oh, I like this. This is an option.
Look, it's funny. You think this is common sense, but that is so smart. Yes. Who is constantly dealing with all sorts of real estate that has deals fall apart? And who's calling wholesalers? Often not people with the nice properties. It's the dilapidated properties that may have title issues anyways. Very, very smart. Work your wholesalers. Very, very smart. You've obviously lost money on deals doing this. Tell me about a deal you lost money on that wasn't just like, hey, I gave them $3 and it didn't work out.
It was a painful one, but it was a pivotal one, really important one. As we started getting more and more complicated deals, I'd be willing to take more risk because I had significant capital. And I'd risk 500, I'd risk 2,000. Well, now I'd risk 70, now I'd risk 200. Like I'd go deep if I thought I'm going to make big money. You know, I bought deals for $1.5 million, sold it for $3.5 million. I bought them for $250,000, sold it for $1.25 million. Massive margins. And I came across a property in a big MSA, and I didn't understand the inception of title doctrine. And what that means is that if you buy a property, there's certain times when you have the ability to make a claim for title or not make it. When do you have the ability to make the claim of title? It's the inception of your title. Well, if you get a deed and you bought the house, it's that moment. But what about if you get a contract for a deed? Are you familiar with contract for deeds?
Yep.
All right. So what if you get one of those? When you sign that contract, is that your inception of title? Or when you get your deed 10 years later and you pay it off, is that your inception of title? Which one would you think it is?
I would think it would be 10 years later when you get it.
That's what I thought. I spent $70,000 to buy all this interest, pay off taxes, and this other person, based on the way the title chain worked, this woman bought a property in contract for deed situation, then got married to a man as their second marriage. His children should have had no interest under the way you said and the way I believe.
Oh.
No, that's not how it worked. So one of his children made a claim because he saw the property getting boarded up as in a super high value area downtown MSA. And he was trying to figure out what was going on. Well, I don't know how he got there. He ended up getting to a big law firm, like a top 5 law firm in that city under a pro bono situation. So I filed a lawsuit to get him to reimburse me the taxes. He said, he says he wants his claim. I said, it's fine. I'll take my share of the taxes that you owe me. So let's do that. Then a big firm comes back and responds and educates me in their pleadings on the inception of title doctrine. I'm immediately, of course, like an attorney at this point. So today I have 3 of them in my office and 2 other firms outside that are like consistently repping us to the tune of 50 to 80 grand a month in legal fees. But
Jeez.
back then I would just call and get somebody to help. In a form of an original petition, there was a new lawsuit. They educated me on the inception of title doctrine, and I knew I was dead in the water. I had no fight. I couldn't fight. I was going to lose. So I walked away from the $70,000 I'd spent. I gave them my interest in the property. They had no money. They couldn't pay me back for the taxes, even though they should have. What am I going to do? I was done. But in that moment, there were 10 lessons that I learned in that deal, and it remarkably changed how I handled certain situations. So God, it was painful at the time, but all right today. Oh, and the attorney in that case, who was a remarkable right attorney, I ended up 3 or 4 years later meeting him at a social event and hiring him. And he works for a different firm now, and I work with him on the very meaningful cases that we do.
Very nice. Smart. Yes. And so now you have this smarter attorney who could enlighten you on contract for deed. Is there a way to protect yourself if you're going into a contract for deed situation?
You just have to look at the fact pattern. And in that case, I would have realized that there were other owners and I would have called them and worked with them. I didn't know that they were part of the ownership at the time, so I couldn't do anything.
What about when you're going in and you're going into an agreement with one owner and then they get married? Is there something you can put into the original contract that states like any future spouses, anything are not part of this agreement? You just have that right in there?
Yeah, you can. But in that case, all of those things happened 15, 20 years before. So I couldn't affect any of them. This was 20 years later.
What other lessons did you learn from that loss that you're still applying today?
Another really important one is I spend more time trying to negotiate with people. I was going through a phase in my business at the time where I was using the judicial system to solve these problems, but I didn't know how fast to accelerate that or how long to be diplomatic for. So I went through a phase that summer where I just thought, I'll try to have a negotiation. When it doesn't work, I'll file the lawsuit, get it moving, get it going like a business, put the process in place. And I realized that was far too inflammatory, but I was younger, a little more naive. And now we spend a lot more time negotiating. You'd be surprised how many people actually come across the line when you just be patient.
Right. More phone calls, less lawyers.
More phone calls, more explanation, more proof, things like that. Yeah. I mean, think about this for a minute. Amanda, what if somebody called you and said, your great grandpa had this farm down in Mississippi and you just inherited 30% of this thing and I'll buy it from you tomorrow? You'd be like, what? And they start telling you about all this family you never knew, never met, all these marriages and events and all this. It's very hard for you to agree to anything on the phone because you're shocked with the new information in front of you. So you got to go through a process of like, do I even believe this? Let me look at the information. Let me see if it makes sense. Maybe now I believe it. Okay, now that I believe it, do I trust this person? Do I want to do the deal they're proposing? There's all these steps that happen in the person's mind. But I didn't think like that. When I was younger, I was just trying to like use any tool I can to get to profit quick. And that was a problem sometimes.
When you make these first phone calls to people who don't know they're part owners of some land out of state, how do you start those phone calls?
You know, it kind of depends on who's making the call, but usually I would try in those times to address the elephant in the room. I would just tell them, look, I know this is going to be a little weird. My name is Logan Fullmer. I'm calling you about some real estate that you probably don't even know you own. Probably some family you hadn't talked to in a long time or forever. But after we get off the phone, at this time, I had a lot less on the internet about what I do, just a couple websites and some credibility stuff, Better Business Bureau things. So then I ask them, okay, maybe you can look me up to make sure I'm a real person. I give them my office address, look in the appraisal district, I own the place, like I'm a legitimate thing. Let's talk. Some people would want to talk, some people wouldn't.
Do you send the information as the next step? Like, let me just give you everything I have so you can see what I'm saying is real?
I did. In the early days, I would actually mail packages, especially if people would go cold on me sometimes. So I'd mail all this stuff to them. You know, these days, if they trust us and they're willing to work with us, then I'll email them stuff. But if they're so closed off, they don't want to play ball and all that, I'm just like, forget it. There's another person right now that we understand how to find, how to negotiate, how to do these deals. I would rather deal with somebody who's easy to deal with than hard. I'm not going to spend months trying to get this crazy person over the line because they're going to be impossible to get to the end zone anyway. Let me just deal with someone who's reasonable. You can't do a good deal with a bad person, and that's apparent here.
What's the biggest challenge in your business right now?
Man, I don't know. I don't know. This sounds a little strange, but I did it right. I don't have any. It works. I've built business partners that run it. So I'm full with education and yapping on the internet. And, I sit in monthly meetings, look at financial reports, and I've got a docket report that we look at that talk about the legal strategy, because that's something I'm better at. But I don't know. There's a lot of big problems. Actually, it works well.
What made you decide to go from doing the deals to employing others to do the deals, and you go spread the word on what you're doing?
There was a time when the business started to work and folks stopped pestering me. They stopped asking me questions. They stopped coming to my office. And I remember that it was the winter time, and I had this habit. I would chew cigars a lot, and I'd be chilling. I'd chill in my office, reading stuff on the internet, reading books, chewing cigars. And I found that this was a different winter than I'd had in the past. I wasn't as necessary as I was, and I was really happy because business was growing. And I realized okay, this has been built right. Would I like it to be a little bit bigger? Maybe so. But when you build a business that you don't have to be in the hot seat in the middle of everything all the time, you did it right. I didn't quite know where I was headed, but it was built like that. And I remember that wintertime, it was stretching into January in the beginning of the year. And I kind of got bored. I got, idle hands, the devil's workshop, they say, and I was antsy. And at that point I thought, what's next? And I thought the internet would be a lead source. I started talking on the social media platforms because more people would bring us deals because they knew that we could do something that others couldn't. That's how that happened.
All right. And now you partner with others who are in your network and do JV deals and all sorts of things, right?
Oh gosh, yeah. Right now we've got about 70 units in inventory for JV. Total inventory right now is probably somewhere between 150 and 170 units. And that's not multifamily. That's individual, a lot, a house, a ranch, a warehouse, whatever. So you have significant JV pipeline.
All right. Logan, I really appreciate you coming on today. You didn't hold things back. You just kind of said it how it is, and you really gave people information. I really appreciate that. And what a compelling story, the highs, the lows, and the business that you've built. If Best Ever listeners want to find out more about you, where do they go?
I would tell them to go to YouTube. I'm spending more time there lately. It's okay. Is it okay if I tell them about a training that I'm doing?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. In January, I've got an all-day training. Well, there's 3 days, but the general admission is a single day. And it's me and my office, all the guys that run the deals in here. We've laid it out for the general admission day where it's basically general business. What's a deal look like? How do we find leads? How do we research them? How do we make offers? How do we structure deals? And then how do you run a business? Being a one-person in an apartment like it was for me a long time ago, all the way up to I don't know what we have today, maybe. So it's a really cool training. Who it's for is anybody in real estate, basically, who wouldn't mind trying a couple wacky deals along the way to see if they could get a whopper of a margin. These deals are already coming in everybody's pipeline. You just got to choose to make a side effort, a little hobby for a couple months and fool with it. That's who it's for. So I don't know, maybe if I can give you a link to share in there or something like that.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes.
Okay. Otherwise, go to Instagram. I'll post about it every day until the event.
Awesome. Logan Fullmer, thank you for joining today. Hope you have a good one.
You got it. Bye, Amanda.
Best Ever listeners, thanks for joining in today. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you leave us a 5-star review and share it with somebody who could find it useful. Follow and subscribe so you can hear us every Wednesday on Invest Beyond Multifamily, and have a best ever day.